I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for making time in your day to learn more about managing technical debt in NetSuite. I'm Mark Walker. I'm the CEO of Strongpoint, and this problem of managing technical debt and being able to move forward at speed in NetSuite, and of course, with the other platform we support, Salesforce, is the reason why this company was created. It's not a theoretical problem for us. I was the chief operating officer of a high-growth software company that experienced this problem. And so we're going to talk about the problem today, and we talk about strategies for addressing the problem. Some of you I know are new to Strongpoint. We won't be doing a complete demonstration of the product. We won't be doing a lot of a run through of our full compliance capabilities, which we're very well known for. We'll be mostly focusing on very, very practical things, ways in which Strongpoint can be used to address very, very practical concerns around technical debt. So let me just wait. There we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is technical debt. Technical debt has many different definitions. In development, it's often termed the downstream cost of shortcuts. And the interesting thing about declarative environments like NetSuite and Salesforce is the environment allows us to do things that would be the equivalent of a shortcut in a dev process by simply declaring things. We can build things very, very rapidly. And the old joke is, the good news is you've got the most flexible ERP system in the world, and the bad news is you have the most flexible ERP system in the world. But what we're really talking about is the additional cost of making new improvements arising from previous implementation decisions. And as we know, as you run NetSuite longer and longer, you have more and more and more complexity, or if you have a very large implementation, you get complexity right out of the gate. And what we're talking about is the cost of making the next change that depends upon what we did before. So we'll talk about the causes of technical debt. We're going to talk about strategies for addressing technical debt, rather than just the obvious strategy of potentially cleaning things up. There's some other things you can do much faster than that deliver a ton of value. And then we're going to then dig into how to use automated documentation to drive productivity despite technical debt, how to clean up unused customizations, and then how to optimize your change review, because that's often the place where the technical debt actually causes the largest problem. So the causes of technical debt in NetSuite are not NetSuite specific. They're actually the same in any platform. But the fundamental cause of technical debt is a change in business process. If you built something and if your business wasn't changing, you wouldn't have new things you need to implement, and therefore you wouldn't have a technical debt problem. But the other part of it is, as you move forward, you leave things behind. And things accumulate. And some of these things accumulate very rapidly, like say searches and old reports in NetSuite, and some of them accumulate progressively. So things that were a good idea 3 years ago may no longer be a good idea, and not every process improvement that we attempt to implement gets it fully adopted. This tends to produce, with the exigencies of moving forward very quickly, we sometimes get short-term workarounds. We don't know exactly where we're going to end up. We're going to do something now, because if we don't, we have nowhere to put the data. And those decisions are not wrong. That's why you bought a declarative platform like NetSuite, or at least part of the reason why you bought it. But they do lead to potential problems over time. The classic example of this is making a quick and dirty little pick list to solve an immediate problem. So you have a list field, and somebody starts using that list field, and then afterwards somebody decides they need to refactor it, because maybe we said medium, large, small, medium, large, and what we really need is under 5 million, 501 to 10 million, etc. And refactoring the data may not map directly onto small, medium, large, and you may have dependencies flowing off that need to be redesigned. So the short-term workaround causes a longer-term cost. Duplication of similar customization is also an issue. We see this particularly in some cases in large organizations with many subsidiaries, where you need a version that's slightly different for each each marketplace, but the data in them is the same, and therefore you have complex dependencies that may not be immediately apparent because field A doesn't depend on field B, but they're linked by something else, script C, and those dependencies would be difficult to understand. The fundamental cause, or the fundamental obstacle to resolving technical debt, is visibility. If you were omniscient, if you knew everything about the system and you could keep that all in your head, you would be able to navigate many of these problems, at least more expeditiously, be able to define the path forward very rapidly. And that's one of the things that Strongpoint is seeking to do. Human beings are not well built for doing that in their heads. It's not a good use of the resources, and software is really, really good at it. So we're going to try to solve things by giving better visibility and be looking at that in some detail. And the thing to be remembered here is that we're actually not just worried about understanding the not valuable complexity that we built. The real objective or the real challenge is properly navigating around the valuable complexity that we have built and making sure that we are running the most efficient process possible in order to keep the business moving forward while also protecting the valuable customization that we have built, and also, of course, our data. Because, of course, the concern we always have, people always talk about, is if I change this, what will break? That's actually not the worst outcome. Breaking something, usually everybody realizes it's broken and this doesn't work anymore, unexpected error or whatever. That's not the worst potential outcome. The worst potential outcome is it just changes. Context changes, and now you've fried your data. And that's the concern that certainly many of our customers operationally have. It's certainly the concern that those of our customers who are public or regulated, their auditors are worried about. It's not that the system's bad, it's that the data's bad because the system has changed in some unexpected way. Of course, this can not only be a change to the actual data itself, but it can also be a change to the meaning of reports. In other words, it can change to the meaning of things moving forward. And the final challenge that has really become very significant in the last 5 years in particular, and is becoming more and more so because of the massive growth in logo count of the NetSuite platform in the last 12 to 14 months, is loss of tribal knowledge. It has always been difficult to hire talent for this very rapidly growing platform. People are experienced enough to make decisions. But now with the growth of the platform accelerating, we're seeing an awful lot of turnover in staff, sometimes individual people, sometimes entire teams. And for Strongpoint, that is actually a good thing, right? Because people, when they move to other companies, often take us with them. But for our customers, it's a very, very stressful thing. Or for people who before they were customers, that was a very stressful thing. Once they are a customer, it's still stressful to lose your staff. That's certainly true. But at least the knowledge didn't walk out the door. All the information is still there. So the strategies for managing technical debt, and we are going to move on and look at some of these things in action, are really actually pretty straightforward, but they're not things that people are really able to do without a system such as Strongpoint. So the first strategy would be to be able to visualize the dependencies and through automated documentation. So again, if you had complete documentation of everything, and it's not just documentation of what's there, but documentation of what's being used and who it's being used by, that can help unpack this very, very quickly. And it's the first strategy everybody should invoke. In fact, if you even have a single person in your organization who could do this, it's going to help an awful lot. We have a very, very simple product called Flashlight, which is our bottom, entry-level product. It's very, very affordable and designed to have at least one person in your organization be able to actually understand all the complexity. We have many other products, so I'm not going to go too much into products other than that, but we believe that everybody should have a perfectly documented NetSuite account, and that's very achievable. Because then you can ask the question and you can visually see that. We'll see that in a second. But the second thing that we need to do, if we're going to move expeditiously, is automate our risk decisioning. So in many cases, the risk of making a mistake is so high, even if you have no documentation, it's incredibly high. If you have documentation, it is now, but you're relying on a single person to do it, your risk is substantially lower, but now everybody is not 100% sure that everybody ran it to ground in the right way. So having automated decisioning where we insert that as early in the process as possible. So we insert it either at the first ticket level, and we get an answer as to what the risk level is and what the appropriate change process is. And that is incredibly useful to being able to be super responsive to your stakeholders. And we'll show you an example of that. It enables SMEs and admins and BAs to check risk in seconds. And this means that your developers and your outside consultants are not consuming resources trying to answer, can we do this? And we'll show an example of somewhere where you could make the change right away and somewhere where you cannot make the change right away. And I think the important thing is that you'll recognize is that even though you're not familiar with the system that we're going to be showing this on, as I show you, you will actually understand what the risk is and you'll be able to make a decision right away. Now, you guys are quite probably very competent to make this decision normally, but the point of it is you will realize that you're now competent to do it on any system that the Strongpoint is installed in. And that is what you need in order to have confidence in the ability of your team to do it very, very quickly. We're going to be showing it natively in NetSuite, but this also works inside Jira and ServiceNow. So all the different interfaces I'll be showing you can also be integrated into Jira and ServiceNow, because of course we want to bring that information as far forward in the process as possible. This is very important for gating. In other words, deciding, triaging whether or not we're going to do something. We have this change. We know for sure it's not that risky. Yes, we can do that. We have this change. We don't know for sure that it's risky because we didn't have a system like this. There's going to be a gating process of resources that are available to just run it to ground. And that's going to slow down our responsiveness. However, cleaning things up is also a good idea. So we're going to then, as a third step, and the first two steps can be implemented incredibly rapidly, days. Right? The third step, starting to clean things up, it's a process. We're going to show you how having the right process can lead to confidence. We're also going to show you some things we can do automatically. One of the big problems that happens inside these NetSuite accounts over time is you accumulate saved searches, and those saved searches become a morass to navigate. And so Strongpoint increasingly is automating a lot of the communication around cleanup and archiving these saved search definitions. So I'll be showing you a hint of that and talking about how we can do things in a very, very expeditious way. But then the final step is automating your change review and center of excellence. So when I mean that, I do not mean using automation to replace oversight. What we're doing is we're using automation to streamline oversight, to provide better information into the process. And one of our customers recently said that the way it most profoundly affected them was not that they got the answer, not just that they got the answer faster. They definitely got the answer about what the impact analysis and the risk was faster. It was that management was able to ask better questions, which actually caused them to do less rework. So it wasn't that they were being irresponsible before. They were running it all the way to ground and making good decisions. But the problem was that management was not able to really understand the full scope of that. And now that management was able to do that, they were able to give better guidance to the BAs and the developer teams to help them be more effective. But the fundamental result was less rework, more successful delivery, less crises. And of course, this is a publicly traded company, so the other part of it is obviously change clearance and compliance. Okay, so let's start taking a look at some of these things. And I'm just going to walk through it. Again, this is not a full demo of the platform. I'm not going to try to demo everything. We're just really interested in talking about the different strategies that one could employ. So the first strategy, many of you will have run into before. this is the Strongpoint ERD. It's an automatically generated visual representation of your NetSuite account. In this case, we picked the customer record, and we're just looking at the custom fields and standard fields with significant relationships. We can include or exclude different things. We can also filter out things that aren't being used, things like that. We can also filter things out by just show things that really, if you have a very complex record, you can filter things down. The important thing about this is if somebody comes to you and says, or to one member of your team and says, can I change the company size field? The proper, sensible, defensible answer from any responsible admin is the answer to your question could be, yes, we can do it in production. Not that we should, but we could do it in production and nothing bad would happen. To it would completely fry our business process and possibly our data in an irretrievable and unrecoverable way. And but in this case, you guys can probably see that I've selected the company size field. It used the company size list. We can see there's a couple of searches hanging off it. And most importantly, there are no scripts and workflows. So in the back of your mind, if you were asked if this is safe to do, you would probably quickly check if there's anything else using the company size list, and the answer is no. And you might want to dig into these searches, but the answer that you can give back to the business stakeholder or that your member of your team can is, this is not a big deal. We can do this for you. We're going to have to go through our change management process because we don't make changes to the data model in production, but it's going to be not a big deal, right? And if you want to drill into it, you can mix up we can look at organizational information to see if these searches, for example, are actually being used. Now, we're not actually using the automated search cleanup in this account, because if we did, all the searches would disappear because nobody's using anything. But if you had automated search cleanup, then the searches that aren't being used aren't going to show up here. You'll just be seeing active searches, again, really optimizing the efficiency of the decision-making of your team. And if we actually wanted to drill into this, because we have great documentation, we can open up the documentation, drive into it, and go and take a look at the details of this. And if we did have a date last used, we can immediately go right in and say, okay, wait a second. Wait a second. The field is being used, right? So that company size field is being used. It's in the filter. And therefore, I'm a little concerned about this. And when in our cleanup view, Strongpoint will flag this for you. But we can also see who's using it. We can see which subsidiaries are using it, because these people belong to different subsidiaries, and all the information we need to do a good change process if we needed to do it. But the answer is still, we could do this. We just need to talk to Alex and Leo and find out if they want to include the new value or exclude the new value from here. So very, very efficient. Now, the customization records have a lot of other information as well, and they're built right into NetSuite, so they are searchable. We're going to use that capability in a second, and we can see a lot of the same detail at the customization record, which means that we can attach things onto, when we attach things onto change requests, or attach things onto attach customizations onto tickets. We're actually bringing with it the ERD view, all of the change history, everything else that we need to know in order to understand what's going on and what has gone on historically with this object. By way of contrast, if I pick this other object here, or this other field, and I'm going to pick this field, the customer credit on hold field, we can immediately see that it has a script, and the script actually connects up to a workflow. So you don't need to know anything about the account, just have essential common sense to basically be able to go, that is not going to be an easy thing to modify. If you're going to change how you use it, or you're going to change it itself, we're going to have to regression test this stuff. And that's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact. So we're not going to go, does anybody remember if the customer credit on hold field touches anything? We can immediately know. And we can go from thing to thing, and we can navigate it very, very straightforwardly. Right. So if we move this up a level, we've gone past the documentation side. And by the way, the documentation has all sorts of tools for monitoring other things, like things that are likely to cause technical debt, like fields with bad script IDs, where if you put coding on top of them later, that's going to cause a problem. So if you have cust entity 469, if you don't fix it now, the problem of fixing it later is going to get more and more complicated. So I'll warn you about those sort of things, or things with no help, or things with no description, where we've got invisible technical debt, where it's going to cause adoption problems. We can pick those things off as well. But in this case, I want to talk about ticketing. So triaging tickets when they come in, when people are asking for enhancements, or frankly identifying problems. And in this case, somebody has simply gone through and they've picked that demo search. Remember the one we looked at before that hadn't been used since 2017. It was only used by a couple of people. And they want to update this demo search, start using it for some reason. And they want to know what the risk is. And the people at the help desk can actually either do this right in our record in the process issue, or they could do it actually in Jira or ServiceNow where the tickets are coming in, and they can immediately find out what the risk is. And basically it's saying, look, our policy is that we need to log the changes, but we don't need to get anybody to approve changes to this. There's no downstream risk. That's massively faster. That's even faster than this approach. And it's also something you can spread out to subject matter experts. You can make this available, some of our customers make this available so that people can actually see it right in the ticket process, so they can actually see the answer, because why bother to go and talk to a person when we already know what the answer is? By way of contrast, this report requires a change request because it's associated with a policy that says that is protecting this. This is very commonly protecting things like our SOX, SOX-related reports, but this could also be specific reports that function as control, for example. They're important for business process, so reports or searches and other things. So we're making a distinction here between something that's safe to do, something that's not safe to do. And then we can say, in this case, the industry type field, which is a field on the customer record, but does not have any complex dependencies on it, we can say that needs to go through sandbox development and testing. And these settings are configurable. We'll look at that in a second. But what we're doing is we're cutting right through the technical debt and going, yeah, in theory, you need to run this to ground, but in practice, you don't. You need to go and do it in sandbox because making changes to your data model in production is not a good idea, right? And because we need to go through the process of saying, right, is that the right way to change the field? Are we doing the right thing? Is that even a good decision? So we need to go and do this in sandbox first, but we know for sure that we don't have complex regression testing coming up because there is no complexity to regression tests. We may need to do acceptance testing for sure. We need to get make sure that it's meeting the business needs, but we don't need to worry about really complex things that are going to involve our dev team. By way of further contrast, that set customer credit on hold field that we were looking at, or actually that's the cousin of the one we were looking at, actually, the set customer credit on hold field, that is a full software development lifecycle. That's basically saying this has got code on it, and if you go to change this, it's going to cause some problems. So the purpose of this system, whether you're using in Jira, ServiceNow, or natively in Strongpoint, is to move that decisioning way forward in the process. This allows you to use your resources more effectively. It allows you to be much more responsive to your business stakeholders, and it means that those elementary changes that could have been done simply don't die because nobody can get around to doing the analysis on them, and this means that the business can keep moving forward quickly. As we often say, nobody's ever said, hey, we missed our numbers, but way to go on the change control. Like that conversation never happened. Maybe perhaps with some of our pharma clients, but generally speaking, the change control is a necessary evil. It's not the objective of the business. The objective of the business is to move forward, to grow, to serve the customers better, and to be successful. And so knowing these answers very, very quickly can help you get a long way down the curve. Now, the important thing for management, which we'll come back to in a second, is that Strongpoint's also going to watch all the changes and make sure that anything that actually changed did go through the appropriate change control. So if you're using Strongpoint for change control, not only are you simplifying your change control process, which again is one of the one of the things that arises from technical debt that you need to end up having complex change control processes. So we can simplify that. But the other thing it's going to do is it's going to flag anything that's non-compliant that where if you'd looked at the impact analysis, you would have discovered something bad, right? Something dangerous. So Strongpoint is smart enough to say, for example, if you add code to a field that wasn't already scripted, and you had approval to add the scripting, and the field is not being specially protected, Strongpoint will say, that's okay, that's fine. You got approval for the scripting, you got approval, that's all good. If you, however, added code to a field that already had scripting on it, and you had not actually done the impact analysis against that field, that would be a very dangerous thing to do. So Strongpoint can alert management, not just in production. You can also view these reports in Sandbox before it gets to production. Go, wait a second. You just decided when you're writing this code that you're going to start touching this field. That may or may not be a bad idea, but we need to make sure that we understand how it'll affect this other automation further down. And there could be other complications as well. So speed, what we're talking about here is speed. Now, the other part of this, going back to the asking better questions part of the answer, is that during the change process, there's information that we want to know that's really important. So, for example, we want to know, if we set a number of customizations, we want to surface which subsidiaries are using it, because this in itself drives complexity. If it's used by one sub, not a big deal. If it's used by lots of subs, that may be irrelevant, right? For some of you, you have standardized processes running across all your subs, and they're just essentially regionalized versions of the same thing. But in many cases, that's not necessarily the case. We have things that apply, and we need to remember that we need to talk to the French team and the German team, and et cetera. We can also automate approval. I'm going to skip over this right now, but the thing I wanted to point out here was the impact analysis. This is the part that is the better question part. So in this case, we're looking at 3 objects that we already looked at. 2 of them we already looked at: the demo search, the industry type, and the number of daily script executions. And in this case, the system's coming back and it's saying, look, what's happened here is we can associate customizations with process. You don't need to do that, but we have in this case. So it's getting a process warning. This is an organizational warning. It's giving an object-specific or an object type-specific warning on the industry type field. We're saying there's no impact of customizations, but if you're going to mess around with the field, you need to make sure that you've thought about archiving the data in the field, because if you're going to actually change the field, which may not be what you intend, you may be changing the use of it or something else, but if you're actually going to change the field, it'd be an awfully good idea if you backed up the data first. And there's tools for doing that in Strongpoint. You can also do it manually and just certify that you've done it. The number of daily script executions field, it's actually saying, look, first of all, there's an active process. Second of all, it's recently used. So you're about to change a field that people are actively using. You notice this field was not being used. Very, very low risk. This field is being used. In fact, this wouldn't be showing up on the impact analysis except for the fact that it had an active, actually would, if the data had to be archived, it would still show up. This is a organizational utilization risk. This is a technical risk. It has dependent scripts. We can see the dependent scripts right here. And it's also showing you any other related objects that you need to be concerned about. Finally, it's not archived, same risk here. And finally, this thing comes from a dependent managed bundle. So if you change it, it won't stay stably changed. And all of those risks are being articulated in seconds. And it's not that your team can't do that. It's that when they're doing that, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is moving the company forward. And their lack of confidence that they've done it perfectly will cause them to procrastinate, because that's the same thing to do. You know, if you're playing blackjack and you don't know what the next card is, but you have to bet $1 million, you're probably not going to bet the initial $1 million. You feel very uncomfortable doing that. If you can see the cards, you can see the next 2 cards, you're feeling much more comfortable to put that $1 million down, right? And so we have to recognize that for our teams who are trying to do this at speed, this decisioning is very stressful, and this ability to get to the heart of it is very useful. And of course, they can drill into this. these customizations are linked. So if they want to see what the ERD looks like of this script and actually go down into it without reading the code and see everything that it touches, they can do that in seconds. So better decisions, and for management, much better questions. Okay, so automated decisioning, moving us forward in the process, helps you move forward much more quickly. It's also going to start a process that leads to compliance. So for those of you who have compliance obligations or just want to sleep at night, having the ability to have a systematic assessment of risk and be able to move down the road of following that is going to lead to tighter compliance. And compliance standards are starting to change. When we just had SOX, we had this concept of materiality, right? But and so therefore, there was some debate about this, and there was still some problems around how do you know which objects actually need to go through high-level change control. So people were just looking at user roles and script and workflow changes, and then as Ernst & Young started to point out, well, wait a second. What about changes to the data model that touches all those things? And our system had already been designed to do that. And that's where the complexity is. If you just said, "Oh, is this a script? Do we have to do it? Do we have to do it very carefully?" That's easy. It's the question is this object, whatever it is, touching something that either is used by an important business process, subject to a very, very tight change control because of GDPR, for example, or because of SOX obligations, or is just sensitive because it's part of our procurement system, or it's part of our provisioning system of our SaaS company. And we want to decision that super, super quickly. So if we move on from that, so the great thing is about this part of what we did, obviously changing your change management process, that's a big deal. The way that Strongpoint is designed is that you actually try to change your change management process as little as conceivably possible, but the advanced decisioning part can be implemented extremely rapidly. The next part is about cleaning things up. And this is another example of Strongpoint automatically using the information in the system to make decisions about risk. But in this case, it's the risk of cleaning something up. So in this case, we have, go down and look at an item, for example. So we have a field called the pop-up image. And maybe at some point we were using that field in our e-commerce, and maybe we don't care about it anymore because we moved our website, off NetSuite, or we just changed the way that we actually do things. But that image, that field is still sitting there, and we can see some other fields that show up in different places, right? And so what we're looking here is we're saying, okay, is this safe to clear? And we can see that this hasn't been used since January 16 of 2017. And so then we can start to annotate whether we want to clean it up. We start planning our cleanup, and we can start to, if we want to, we can drill into it, and we can see who the current owner is, and we can change owners in the system. But immediately we can see, are there any scripts, are there any searches or mouse updates, are there any workflows? And if you're using, if you've either documented or we're going to be rolling out, or we are rolling out more and more support for iPaaS layers, does it have an integration that we should be concerned about? Then we can immediately see how complex this is to clean up. And we can actually go further than that. We can actually associate the object with a change request so that we can get approval. So the interesting thing about cleanup change requests is they don't run from a ticket to the Strongpoint change request. It actually often starts the other way around. It's from a view like this that goes up to the change request. And we can, this case, we've already associated this with a change request. I'll show it to you in a second. But if we wanted to, we could simply decide to go in and create a change request just by typing in this field, and it'll create the change request right away and associate the objects with it. So really, again, crazy dedication to efficiency. If you're doing this, you want to be able to add things very quickly, you can do it this way, or you can simply go in and select an existing change request and show it that way. Now, the change request has the same function, the one we were just looking at, right? So it's actually going in, and if you're being asked to clean things up, you certainly want to know whether there's any impacts on it. And so now when people are you're able to group things, you're able to plan things. I'm planning to clean this up. And by the way, we could also be looking at something and going, I don't know if I could definitely set my cleanup status to under investigation. So it's not just, yes, it's ready to clean up. I can also identify other problems with it, like I want to change the owner, or I want to do other things that are cleanup activities, fix the script ID, organizing your cleanup in this way. But when we get down to the change request, what we're seeing is right away, this has no dependencies. So we have no dependencies down here, and therefore, this is safe to clean up. Now, this will be rare, right? What you'll actually normally see is that there are dependencies, but they're saved searches. But if you're automatically cleaning your saved searches, then if there are any actively used saved searches, you would already have seen that back here in your warnings. It'll say, wait a second, there's saved searches and mass updates or something else that you need to be concerned about. Okay? Now, we were talking a lot about the idea of automatically cleaning things up, and we don't automatically change your data model. We don't automatically remove things other than save searches, right? And the reason is because save searches accumulate and cause a huge process lag on the company. It's just sort of we often will go into accounts and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of save searches, right? 100 of which are being actively used, or 200 of which are being actively used. And so the ability to clean this up. So this is a very, very simple system. But the big difference about this system is not just meant to automate the cleanup, or as we tell the end users, archive of the save search. It's to automate the communication. So in this case, what we've done is we've made a rule that says we're going to clean up any save searches that are more than 13 months old, presuming that they haven't been used in over a year, probably not useful, right? And we could, in this case, when we're cleaning it up, we would like the system to notify any search owners, or actually anybody who's ever used the search, that we're going to clean it up, and offer them the chance to retain it. Now, if when we explain it, we'll be keeping an archive of it, so if you have to put it back, you can. And it turns out that's very necessary to making people not hit retain on everything, because they're worried about losing things. But we'll retain all the information about it, including all the useful SQL that was in those things. Even if the search isn't being used, it will show up in our SQL library right here. So we'll have access to all that. And then Strongpoint is automatically going to filter out anything that's just simply dangerous. So it's not safe to automatically clean them up. And the most common thing is it's not going to pull things out of your managed bundles. It's not going to pull things with scripting or workflow deployments or data deployments or role deployments or group dependencies. It's not going to remove anything that's being used as a control in the system. And it's not going to remove anything that has a special policy. Now, it'll be rare that you would have things specially protected that you aren't using, possible, but we're still not going to automatically remove those. You can manually remove those if you want. And you can include private searches or scheduled searches or searches that send triggered emails. Although, frankly, as an administrator, you may want to put an automatic rule about the first set, but you definitely would like to find if there's unused searches that send triggered emails, because that means you're sending triggered emails to people who are not often not interacting with those alerts, right? The unused alerts that we're concerned about. You can also exclude things, and normally would exclude things that are very recent because they might have been created but not actually used yet. And you obviously want to exclude things that are available as a sublist, not all the time, but as a basic thing. So the point of this is all the decisions that somebody would make are already set, and when it comes out of the box, it's already on the safest settings, right? And then we can also have other ones where we can say, use it to clean up things left behind by inactive owners. So in other words, somebody's left the company, let's go and clear up all their saved searches. We can adjust the date range. So maybe we don't care about the date range so much. We want to go through this. And when we run this, it's going to produce a list of things. So you can use it either in automated mode, like fully automated mode, where you're just having it run on a weekly basis, and that's normally going to be on your, truly unused things. But the administrative staff can go and use this in seconds and go, yeah, I'm going to go through and retain this or not retain that. And of course, they could also go through and flag this to be, to be reviewed or something like that. They can go through and do more complex things, but it's going to sort the wheat from the chaff. And the reason why we have things that haven't been used since 2016 in here, of course, is we're not actually running this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any data to show you. Right? Very, very efficient, very, very useful tools. So so change management or cleanup normally comes, this sort of cleanup comes very quickly for a lot of our customers. It's almost like the next thing they do after they get the decisioning put in place. But one of the things they do very, very quickly is set up change approval policies. And often it's a very simple default policy, but we can also have more advanced ones. And what this is doing is it's setting the change process that you would like run for changes of a certain type. So I'll give an example. So most people would not disagree that changes to scripted objects or changes to formula objects, those things with SQL in them, or changes to workflows should probably go through a full software development lifecycle. The problem a lot of our customers run into before they started using Strongpoint is because you didn't know what that applied to, because obviously scripts, that's pretty obvious, and workflows, that's pretty obvious. But what's not obvious is what has SQL in it, and what's really not obvious is all the related objects, right? So it's not just scripts and workflows, it's scripts and workflows and anything that touches them. If you think of the examples we looked at earlier, it was a field we saw that was showing a full software development lifecycle. In fact, there are two different fields. And what's happening is Strongpoint's read all the code, it's read all the SQL, it's read the workflow definitions, and it has figured out what is subject to automation, and it's making sure that those things get pushed into the most complex approval process we have. Now, your version of that might be different, but fundamentally, this thing ends in a formal deployment process. And you can actually formally decision that and deploy it. By way of contrast, most of the time, searches and reports, unless they've been specially flagged, and we can do that automatically based on the number or frequency of use, or we can do that manually by selecting specific objects and putting them on a special policy. Normally, we don't want to review changes to, say, searches and reports because we'd like to monitor the changes. We might like to let people know about them, particularly if they use them. Hey, your search or report just changed. But what we don't want to do is have a whole change review process because they don't actually change the data model. They can't break the data. So as long as somebody knows that their report changed or something touching their report changed, that's almost certainly good enough, right? And if they, and we don't want to slow things down. By way of contrast, if a field, you see how these things start to nest, a change to a field that is not scripted or doesn't fall into this complex object section, we want to do that in Sandbox, but we want to know right away that all you got to do is make sure that the end user's happy and that the data model decisions are good. You do not have to worry about a long regression cycle. So we want to be able to set that up. So you can set up your own rules very, very quickly. Most people start with, a very, very basic one. And then you can actually, often people will differentiate. Now I'm going to show you a list. Most people have 2 or 3 rules. They don't have all these, but we can set up rules that apply to specific parts of the system. So to the chart of accounts itself, or we can say that apply to financial changes. So one of our customers has many of our customers have ASC 606 obligations and also other financial obligations, and we want to bring changes under financial oversight. You can do this and set up these policies very, very simply to say, look, reports that are used by the finance team, they're a different cat. Don't go messing with those things. Reports used by everybody else, we're just going to use an inform thing. What we're trying to do here is carve through the technical debt and get the simplest possible process that would actually protect us. And that'll depend on your company, how complex that needs to be. And then what happens is the system then monitors it, because setting up a policy that that you can't enforce is not very efficient, right? So we want to provide information really quickly because that produces efficiency, good decisions. Confidence is the electricity of business. So if you know what the right way to do something is, and you know what you're supposed to be doing, then people can do it, execute on that more effectively. But if you're in management, and particularly if you're in management in a public company, you want this automatically reconciled so that you have this report. Don't worry, nobody's actually doing change management in the system, so there's lots and lots of non-compliant changes. But even if you weren't running the change management process yet, if you could just produce a report that says, show me anything that's not a script or workflow, or show me anything that is a script or workflow, or anything that's anything that hits our full software development lifecycle, because I would like to review that with my team and make sure that we all know what those things are. Now, if you're using the change management system, whether integrated with ServiceNow or Jira or not, Strongpoint will automatically reconcile this stuff. And that little last step produces, for many of our customers, massive savings on audit. If you're a public company, like 90% savings on preparation for audit. And in some of our customers, in the order of 75 to 90% savings on the actual audit, because the auditors come in and they go, audit number one, explain how the sales system works. And, it's an automated system, so they like that. It's a closed loop system. But the concern is, that you'd be missing something. Well, we're not going to miss anything in this system. So then on audit number two, they come in and one of our customers, High Jump Software, said, the auditors came in, they literally said, are you still using Strongpoint? Yes. Did you change any of your policies? No. Okay, can you send us the non-compliant changes report and show all your resolved non-compliant changes? And that's the audit, right? We'll get back to you. And the reason they're not actually diving into the detail is, remember, they're looking for material risk. Well, if you're running a process that tight, how risky could everything be? And we also have those tools for data and for access controls and SOD, not really the scope of this today. So in going through our strategies, our first strategy was to automate the documentation so our teams could just get things done really quickly. And you can start really, really simply with our Flashlight product and start in that right away. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to automate risk decisioning, which is part of our intelligent change management product set, where we're going to actually make smart tickets where people can figure things out, and non-experts can be advised very, very quickly, or not only our best experts can make decisions very quickly about what complexity of process we're going to go through, and do impact analysis that's bulletproof and extremely reliable, very, very, very efficiently. If we're going to go do cleanup, we're going to want to automatically clean up things that are just creating noise, like save searches we're no longer using, and they're creating confusion for our users. And we're going to have a systematic process of cleaning things up in a systematic way. And you can do it on a form-based way, or a process-based way, or in a record-based way, many different ways to organize it. But you have a process now for doing it. And the reason it's the third step is it's not necessary to solve 1 and 2, right? It makes maybe 2 a little bit easier to consume. And then automated change review, this idea that you can not only, based on the risk level, increase or decrease the level and extent of approvals, but you can also route the work to different levels of skill set people. So you can say things that require sandbox development and testing, but don't require regression, do not need our developers. You can actually just sign a BA, or even in some of our customers, a subject matter expert who knows how to make some very basic changes, and say, go do that in sandbox, make your end users delighted, then come and tell us when you're delighted, and we'll do the proper oversight to make before we put it in production. So, covered a lot of stuff. I wonder if we have any questions. I notice we do have one question. Question question from Justina. That do we have presence in the United Kingdom? We do have customers in the United Kingdom, and we are right now working on putting a relationship on the ground in the UK. But our overall process of implementing, in fact, we have one of our very largest customers is in the UK. But the way that we actually support this is we don't do implementation. We don't say, you need to use it the way that we thought about it. It has to be done this way. We come in, we just come in and we say, we are going to provide you with enterprise support, because what you're not going to be doing is doing extensive customization or configuration. You're just going to come in and follow some very basic steps, and our team will be there to coach you the whole way around. So it's really not a lot of time. What we do find is that over time, teams change and we need to continually support you. So we have an enterprise support program. So very, very rapid initial implementation, very, very short time to value. And then companies will move forward in the way that's appropriate to them to consume additional capabilities over time. And how does the product work with other NS add-ons such as EDRP? So if you are using any extension, so imagine if you have an add-on that is if it's a native NetSuite add-on, then we will model it. We're looking at NetSuite at the metadata layer. If it's a managed package, then we will actually realize that there's a managed package. And we saw an example, by the way, in the example where we realized that something came from a managed package, and we'll surface that in the risk. But when changes actually happen to managed package, we will actually report on those in a different way. And the same thing if there's changes that are made to the platform itself. We don't treat those as changes you made. We do track the fact that it changed, but we track that as a managed package change, so that if this becomes relevant, if something stops working and you want to find out what changed, that would include the scope of the managed package. If, on the other hand, however, your team is not going to approve that change in advance normally. There's some exceptions to that, but normally the managed packages are changed automatically by the vendor. I hope this was interesting and helpful to you. The path forward doesn't have to be consume everything that we have. We do have some very different products designed to address different parts of this process. An awfully long way with the beginnings of it. But what I want you to take away from this is think not about giving great tools to analyze things at the very, very end of the process. Think about how you could make your process much more efficient by bringing the information as far forward as possible, and how by using different strategies you can break through technical debt to deliver all the wonderful capabilities that this amazing platform is able to do for your business. Thanks to everybody for your time today. And if you want a more detailed run through of this, by all means, reach out to our team and we will happily walk you through it in a little more detail on the areas that are directly relevant to you and your team, and understand more about how we can tailor it specifically to what you want to achieve. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.